What if the absolute worst way to achieve deep spiritual enlightenment is by going into a quiet room and meditating by yourself?
Oh, yeah. That is definitely not what people usually expect.
Right. Because today we are looking at an idea that argues true peace requires the exact opposite. Like getting into red face, screaming arguments with someone you love.
It's wild.
It really is. Welcome to today's deep dive. So, we are exploring a really fascinating, honestly, deeply counterintuitive excerpt from a text called Chapter of Celestial Cultivation, Article 5, Seeking Kindred Spirits, Gradually Transcending the Mundane. And that is by an author named Shuefeng.
A very hefty title, but the core ideas are so relatable.
Absolutely. And our mission today is to figure out why escaping the exhausting, mundane daily grind doesn't actually mean isolating yourself. In
Yeah.
fact, achieving a higher spiritual plane seems to require getting incredibly and sometimes messily entangled with another human being.
Right, which completely dismantles the popular stereotype of the solitary spiritual seeker. I mean, we all know the image, right?
Oh, sure. The lone ascetic in a cave.
Exactly. The guy on a misty mountaintop, surrounded by total silence. The underlying assumption there is that uh, other people are simply noise.
Just a distraction.
Yeah, they are the friction holding you back. And if you want true peace, well, you have to run away from human society and just look inward. But Weifeng's philosophy flips that entirely on its head, suggesting that isolation is actually a massive trap.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why isolation is a trap, we first have to look at how Swiffing views normal, everyday human society.
Which is not very favorably, to be honest.
No, not at all. He describes the secular world as being completely packed with trivialities. There's this specific, wonderful phrase he uses where he says, everywhere you look, east is short, west is long.
I love that. That phrase perfectly captures the constant petty distractions of our daily lives.
Yeah, the gossip and all that.
Right. There's the comparing, the endless minor dramas, the keeping up with the Joneses. When you are immersed in an environment where east is short, west is long, your brain is constantly processing trivial social data.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It really is.
Yeah.
It makes it nearly impossible for the mind to find actual equilibrium. You are stuck in the weeds of mundane existence, basically reacting rather than observing.
So the natural instinct, when you feel completely burned out by all that noise, is to just run in the opposite direction and become a recluse.
Which makes sense on paper.
It does. But here is where the philosophy gets really interesting. Walking away from society and trying to navigate the spiritual path or the Tao completely alone is framed as a failure of discipline.
What's fascinating here is that it comes down to a really profound psychological insight about human blind spots. I mean, true self-awareness is invaluable, but it is incredibly rare.
Because we just don't see ourselves clearly.
Exactly.
Mm.
Because human beings are naturally wired to be self-opinionated, arrogant, and frankly, somewhat deluded. We inherently center ourselves in our own narratives.
Right.
So if you take that deeply flawed, egocentric brain and isolate it in a cave, you aren't actually finding enlightenment. You are just stewing in your own unchallenged perspective.
Just marinating in your own ego.
Yeah. You might feel incredibly wise and evolved, but without anyone around to puncture your ego, you are likely just building a massive fortress of delusion.
I was actually trying to think of how to visualize this, and it reminds me of trying to perfect your form at the gym.
Oh, okay. Like lifting weights?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine you are trying to learn how to do a heavy barbell squat, and you decide the best way to do it is to go into a dark, empty room with no mirrors and just feel it out.
That sounds like a recipe for a back injury.
It totally is. But you might be standing there thinking, wow, my form is absolutely flawless. I am perfectly balanced. Like you feel completely physically self-aware.
If you're actually completely crooked.
Right. In reality, you are leaning heavily to the left, your back is totally arched, and you are completely off balance. You just don't know what you don't know until an external reflection shows you reality.
That is a perfect analogy. Because in the dark room, your brain tells you a comforting story about your competence. The mirror shatters that story with objective reality.
It forces you to see the truth.
Exactly. And Sufing applies this exact mechanism to spiritual self-awareness. You simply cannot generate objective self-awareness in a vacuum. You need a mirror. And that mirror is a true kindred spirit.
But wait, I mean, the gym mirror makes total sense for a physical movement, right?
Yeah.
But spiritual self-awareness feels entirely internal. How does another person actually show you your own spiritual or emotional blind spots?
Right.
Like a literal mirror reflects light, but how does a person reflect your soul?
They reflect it through friction and reaction. A kindred spirit doesn't just quietly observe you, you know. They interact with your ego. When you are arrogant, they push back.
They call you out.
Exactly. When you are acting out of fear rather than wisdom, they call it out because they know you deeply enough to recognize your patterns. They serve as an external benchmark to actively check your innate delusions.
Which makes finding this person an incredibly high-stakes mission. And Feng does not sugarcoat how difficult this is.
No, he really emphasizes the rarity.
He does. It is framed as a lifelong endeavor. He points out that flowers are easy to obtain, money is easy to acquire, but a true spiritual companion is rarer than wealth. You could literally search the heavens and the underworld and still come up empty.
But the payoff for finding one is framed as fundamentally transformative. There's a beautiful, almost fractal concept introduced here. The text says, a single grain of sand contains an entire universe. One true kindred spirit opens the gateway to a celestial paradise.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Right. You don't need to conquer the whole world or win over massive crowds to understand the universe. You just need one profound, completely authentic connection to unlock that higher plane of existence.
Now, we do need to be very clear about what this connection actually looks like, because the anatomy of this relationship is much more chaotic than you might expect.
It's definitely not what you'd picture for a peaceful monk.
Not at all. What makes someone a true mirror? Well, first, there's an absolute requirement of equality. You treat each other as equals, you discuss profound philosophies together, and there is a level of intimacy where you can share a bed without any discomfort.
Right. A deep comfort with each other.
But the defining characteristic, and honestly the one that totally caught me off guard, is that you have to engage in fierce arguments.
Yeah, the dynamic is intensely passionate. If these two kindred spirits don't see each other for a few days, they feel this restless sorrow, almost as if they're mourning a great loss.
But when they are in the same room, it is not just serene, quiet meditation.
Not at all.
The cycle goes like this. In the morning, you quarrel until your faces are literally red with anger, and you sway you are never going to meet again. You just storm off.
Very dramatic.
Extremely. But then, before sunset, that same person shows up at your door with a bottle of strong liquor, specifically erguatu, which is a type of Chinese spirit grinning mischievously and vowing never to part. It is a complete emotional roller coaster.
It is the complete opposite of detached, sterile asceticism.
It really is. But I have to ask, and maybe you can shed some light on this, isn't spiritual cultivation supposed to be about attaining ultimate peace and tranquility?
That's the common assumption, yeah.
So why all the fighting? Why are we celebrating red-faced arguments and dramatic reconciliations over alcohol? It sounds exhausting, not enlightened.
Well, it goes back to why the recluse fails. Growth requires resistance. If you just want a superficial, sort of fragile sense of peace, you can sit alone in a room and coddle your own ego.
Right.
But if you want actual resilient spiritual growth, you need someone who is going to challenge you. The fighting is the polishing of the mirror.
Oh, I see.
Those red-faced arguments are the exact moments where your ego is being challenged, where your stubbornness is being exposed.
So it is essentially the stress testing of your character.
Precisely. Without a companion to provide that friction, life becomes pitiful and sorrowful. The philosophy argues that without this mirror, a person inevitably swings to one of two unhealthy extremes. Well, you become either completely self-absorbed and arrogant, or you become self-deprecating and despondent. You just lose your center because there is no one there to ground you in reality.
Wow.
And there's a striking metaphor used to describe a life without this companion.
Yeah.
It says you are like a flower blooming with no one to admire it, a leaf falling with no one to grieve.
Oh, that is incredibly tragic. You might be blooming like, you might be achieving things or developing as a person, but it is a hollow, totally isolated event.
Well, exactly.
So having established why this fiercely argumentative mirror is absolutely necessary, the conversation in the text takes a very sudden, really vulnerable turn. Here's where it gets really interesting, because we shift from this idealized picture of a perfect companion to Sui Feng's deeply personal frustrations in the real world.
Yeah, we step out of the abstract theory and straight into the messy reality of trying to actually build a spiritual life. Xu Feng opens up about his own organization, a spiritual community he founded called Lifechanyuan.
He founded this space to gather fellow seekers, hoping to walk this path together. And he says he treats everyone who enters with respect, offering praise and guidance, but he hits a massive wall regarding his own spiritual companionship.
He does.
He talks about facing constant setbacks due to what he perceives as his humble origins and lack of worldly sophistication.
Right. He essentially maps out a social and spiritual hierarchy that leaves him feeling completely isolated. He observes that those who possess greater wisdom or status simply won't associate with him.
So you brush him off.
Yeah, and those who are truly on his level, his actual equals, are often too ambitious. They want to build their own domains and be the leaders of their own movements rather than align with him.
And then there are his devoted followers. Within Lifechanyuan, there's an inner circle he refers to as the Chanyuan Celestials.
Right.
He mentions several of them by name like Hoshan, Taiji, Wuji, Penglai, Wanian, Biyun, Tianshan, and Kanghai, and expresses this deep affection for them. He says they are an integral part of his existence, as precious to him as life itself.
But then he asks a heartbreaking question, doesn't he?
He really does. He asks, can he find even one among them with whom he can argue, then laugh and get drunk under the stars?
And the answer implicitly is no. And it highlights a crucial nuance about the mirror concept. A student or a devoted follower cannot be your mirror.
Because of the hierarchy.
Exactly. If there's a power dynamic, if one person is the teacher and the other is the disciple, the friction isn't authentic. The follower will eventually defer or the teacher will eventually dictate. You need a pure equal to have those ego-shattering arguments.
So even though he's surrounded by a community he built, he is profoundly lonely because he lacks an equal.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really relatable, though. He doesn't just blame his own social standing or bad luck. He zooms out and identifies a much broader, universal obstacle that is holding absolutely everyone back from this transcendent state. And honestly, reading his diagnosis of society feels like reading a modern critique of burnout culture.
It really does. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the underlying tension is that the desire to transcend the mundane is practically universal. Everyone wants peace. Everyone wants to step off the hamster wheel.
Absolutely.
Yet the people who actually achieve a free and graceful life are as rare as a shooting star. It is not a lack of desire that's holding humanity back.
No, it is the crushing burden of human obligation. He paints a picture of a person trapped in a web. Above you, there are elderly parents who need care. Below you, there are children who need nurturing.
A lot of pressure.
And in between, there's a spouse needing attention. And on all sides, there are neighbors, friends, and siblings requiring support.
It is the biological and sociological reality of being human. We are a communal species bound by duty.
And it sounds exactly like the modern sandwich generation. I mean, you are trying to reach a higher state of consciousness, but you are stuck answering urgent emails, paying a mortgage, figuring out your aging parents' health care, and making sure your kids are doing their homework.
Right, there's just no room left.
Furthermore, he notes that in a society where competition grows increasingly fierce, even if you give absolutely everything you have, you still might fall behind. He asks this rhetorical question: who has the time to live freely and gracefully in the world?
It is a devastating diagnosis of our environment. The heaviest weight on the human soul isn't a lack of spiritual ambition. It is the sheer gravity of mundane responsibilities.
The day-to-day grind.
Every time you try to look up at the stars and cultivate your mind, the immediate, urgent needs of the mortal world just pull you back down into the dirt. A restless mind and a distracted heart simply cannot cultivate transcendence.
So we are presented with this massive, seemingly unsolvable problem. You need a fierce, equal companion to achieve self-awareness, but finding one is nearly impossible.
And even if you do find them,
Right, even if you miraculously find your perfect mirror, you are both likely too exhausted from taking care of your families and surviving the societal rat race to actually engage in meaningful spiritual growth. So how do we escape that gravity? Because Suifeng's proposed solution is incredibly drastic.
it is a rigorous, systematic untangling from society. The philosophy states that the only feasible way forward is to gradually sever worldly attachments.
Now, we need to clarify that this isn't a call to just abandon your family in the middle of the night.
Oh no, definitely not.
He is very specific that you must first fulfill your core biological and ethical duties. You have to give your heart completely and finish your obligations to your parents and your children.
But once those foundational duties are fulfilled, the mandate becomes strict detachment. The goal is to slowly, deliberately distance yourself from all other secular ties.
So no more networking events.
Exactly. If a relationship naturally exists, you accept it peacefully. If it fades, you embrace its absence. But the cardinal rule is to never, ever intentionally entangle yourself in new worldly bonds.
No new networking, no new social drama, no taking on new obligations just to feel important. You basically just stop feeding the web.
By stopping the intake of new worldly ties, you can slowly bleed off the pressure of the mundane world and begin to approach what he calls the celestial realm.
And to give us a taste of what that celestial realm actually looks like in practice, he shares a recurring, highly detailed dream. It is this utopian vision of living with his inner circle, his fellow seekers, far removed from society. And the daily schedule of this dream is fascinating because it is so specific.
Yeah, it provides a really clear blueprint for a life completely stripped of artificial societal pressure.
Let's walk through a day in this utopia. At dawn, they climb mountains, chop wood, fetch water, and plant melons in the fields. It starts with hard, physical, grounding labor.
Getting connected to the earth.
Exactly. Then at noon, they retreat to the shade of the trees. They sit together, discussing profound scriptures and philosophies while sipping tea, accompanied by the sound of a traditional stringed instrument, a guqin.
Notice the balance there.
Yeah.
The morning is anchored in physical survival and connection to the earth. The afternoon shifts to high-level intellectual and spiritual engagement. It is a perfectly balanced human rhythm.
It sounds lovely. Then in the late afternoon, the tone shifts again. They play. They chase each other through forests and streams like children. It is a complete unburdening of the adult ego.
Just pure joy.
And finally, at night, they meditate in the quiet, refining their spirits to shed the last remnants of mortal attachment.
It is a profoundly beautiful vision of communal simplicity. But even as he dreams it, Xuefeng remains grounded in the brutal reality of how hard it is to get there. He ends his thoughts with a distinctly somber historical metaphor.
Right, the paths of Shu.
Yes, he writes that cultivating the Tao is more challenging than ascending the heavens from the treacherous paths of Shu.
For those unfamiliar, that is a famous reference in Chinese literature to a mountainous region with paths so steep and dangerous they were considered practically unnavigable.
It is the ultimate symbol of an impossibly grueling journey. This raises an important question, right? He's acknowledging that the utopian dream is beautiful, but the act of actually pulling yourself out of the gravitational pull of ordinary life, transcending the mortal world, is the most difficult task a human being can undertake.
So, what does this all mean? Bringing this all back down to earth for you, listening right now, what do we actually do with this? Is the goal to literally quit our jobs, stop making friends, and go chop wood in a secluded forest?
Probably not practical for most of us.
Right. Or is this highly detailed utopian dream just a beautiful fantasy born out of one man's profound frustration with modern burnout?
Well, I think the real value isn't in taking the instruction to sever all ties as a literal immediate command. The true insight here is the diagnosis of our modern exhaustion. It forces us to recognize that our spiritual stagnation usually isn't a failure of willpower.
It's not just us being lazy.
Exactly. It's a consequence of our environment. We are carrying too much.
We are drowning in east is short, west is long.
We are. And paradoxically, the philosophy tells us that the way out of this overwhelming societal web isn't to run away into complete isolation. The way out is deeply intentional connection.
That's the core paradox. To escape the exhausting, petty drama of the world, you don't reject humanity. You find one specific, extraordinary human being, your mirror.
Your kindred spirit.
You dive deeply into that connection, allowing them to argue with you, shatter your ego, and bring you back to reality with a bottle of liquor and a laugh under the stars. Enlightenment is not a solo mission.
Far from it.
It demands a fierce, equal companion to reflect your blind spots, and it requires a conscious, difficult untangling from the daily grind, refusing to let the trivialities of the world consume your finite energy. So think about the people in your life right now. Do you have a true kindred spirit? Someone who challenges you, who refuses to let you settle into arrogance, and who keeps you deeply, sometimes frustratingly, grounded.
And, we have spent this entire time talking about how crucial it is to find someone to act as your mirror. But that leaves us with a much more intimidating inward-facing question to mull over.
What's that?
Are you brave enough and brutally honest enough to be that red-faced, truth-telling mirror for someone else?